The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the dusty hills, casting a golden glow over the wide expanse of the widow's ranch. Sarah adjusted the worn leather strap of her hat and wiped the sweat from her brow as she stood outside the barn. Ever since her husband passed 2 years ago, life on the ranch had been a steady struggle. Managing the livestock, fixing fences, and handling the daily grind all rested squarely on her shoulders. The ranch was more than just a piece of land. To Sarah it was the legacy of her family, a place filled with memories, love, and the promise she made to keep it thriving. But the loneliness was often overwhelming. She had tried to manage alone, but lately, the weight of responsibility was beginning to feel heavier than she could bear. It was late afternoon, when a knock came at the door of the main house. Sarah paused, surprised. Visitors were rare this far out, especially this late in the day. She opened the door to find a tall man in worn denim and a weathered hat. His sun-kissed face held a calm, steady gaze, and his boots were caked with dust from the trail. "I heard you needed a rancher," he said, his voice low but friendly. Behind him, a small girl peeked out shyly, her wide eyes taking in the house, and the woman standing at the door. Sarah blinked in surprise, her heart stirring with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "And who might you be?" The man tipped his hat slightly. "Name's Luke. This is my daughter Emma." Sarah looked at the girl, who gave a small, nervous smile. There was something about the pair, the quiet confidence of the father, the innocence of the child that softened the harsh edges of her day. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled faintly of wood smoke and dried herbs. Sarah led them to the kitchen, where she set a pot of coffee to brew. Luke sat down at the worn wooden table, while Emma perched quietly on a chair, fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "I wasn't sure if you really needed help," Luke said, "but when I heard the ranch was struggling, I figured maybe I could lend a hand. I know this life, been working cattle since I was a boy." Sarah studied him, weighing the decision. Trust didn't come easy these days. "Why did you come all this way?" she asked softly. Luke's eyes darkened slightly. "Lost my wife last year, been moving from town to town since, thought it was time to find a place to stay, and maybe start fresh." Emma looked up at her father, her expression quietly hopeful. Sarah glanced around her modest home, feeling the walls seem a little less lonely. Maybe help had arrived in the form of this cowboy and his daughter. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, warming the wooden floors of Sarah's modest ranch house. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the distant sounds of cattle stirring in the pasture. Sarah watched Luke and Emma quietly as they sat at the kitchen table. Emma was timid, but her eyes shone with curiosity as she explored this new world. Luke, for his part, seemed calm and patient, gently encouraging his daughter to settle in. After breakfast, Luke stood and stretched. "Let's take a walk around the ranch," he said. "I want to see what needs fixing." Sarah grabbed her hat and coat. "Follow me," she said, leading the way out the door. They stepped onto the wide porch and surveyed the land. Fences were weathered, and the barn showed signs of neglect. The cattle grazed lazily in the golden light, seemingly unfazed by the coming change. As they walked, Luke asked questions about the ranch, the seasons, the herd, the work that needed to be done. Sarah answered, her voice steady but tinged. With the weariness of years carrying burdens alone, Emma ran ahead, chasing after butterflies and picking wildflowers along the fence line. Sarah smiled at the child's innocence, remembering her own daughter who had grown and moved away years ago. "Looks like you've done a lot on your own," Luke said, turning to Sarah. "I can help you with the repairs. Together, we can bring this place back to life." Sarah hesitated, the vulnerability she'd hidden bubbling just beneath the surface. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," Luke said firmly. "You're just someone who needs a little help. That's what family is for." Emma came running back, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and shyly offering them to Sarah. She accepted with a warm smile, her heart lightened by the small gesture. Over the next few days, Luke proved his skill and dedication. He fixed fences, with careful hands, tended to the livestock, and began restoring the barn. Sarah found herself relaxing in his presence, her worries easing as the work got done. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Sarah opened up about her late husband and the struggles she'd faced running the ranch alone. Luke listened without interruption, his gaze steady and kind. "I know what it's like to lose someone," he said softly. "But I believe in new beginnings. For me, and for Emma." Sarah looked at his daughter, who had nestled close to her father. The sight filled her with a quiet hope maybe this unexpected visitor wasn't just passing through after all. The days grew warmer as spring took hold of the ranch, breathing life into the fields and trees. Sarah found herself waking up earlier, eager to work alongside Luke and watch Emma explore the world around her. The ranch, once quiet and lonely, was now alive with laughter and the steady rhythm of shared labor. Luke was more than just a helper. He was becoming part of the land's heartbeat. He moved with a quiet confidence, understanding the needs of the cattle and the rhythms of the seasons. Sarah admired his strength but also the gentleness he showed Emma, always patient and attentive. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence line along the far pasture, Sarah paused to catch her breath. Luke handed her a bottle of water, their fingers brushing briefly. "You're stronger than you realize," he said, his voice warm. Sarah smiled, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "I've had to be." They worked side by side in comfortable silence before Luke spoke again. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" After all this, Sarah looked out over the fields, the sun casting long shadows across the grass. "I try not to. Sometimes it feels easier to focus on today." Luke nodded. "I understand. But maybe it's okay to hope." That evening, as the stars filled the sky, Sarah found herself telling Luke stories about her past, the joys and the sorrows, the dreams she once held. Luke shared his own memories, including the day he lost his wife and the journey that brought him here. Their shared stories built a bridge between two souls who had known loss but still dared to dream. Emma, too, was blossoming. She began to smile more freely, her shyness fading with every passing day. Sarah found herself looking forward to evenings when Emma would curl up with a book while Luke and she talked quietly over the fire. One afternoon, Sarah received a letter from a nearby town. It was an offer for financial assistance to expand the ranch, an opportunity she hadn't expected. She showed the letter to Luke, her eyes bright with hope. This could change everything. Luke smiled, squeezing her hand. "We'll face it together." That night, Sarah went to bed feeling something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Not just for the ranch, but for a future shared with two people who had quietly become her family. The summer had arrived, bringing with it long, hot days and occasional fierce thunderstorms that swept across the ranch. Sarah, Luke, and Emma had settled into a comforting routine, working the land, sharing meals, and slowly weaving their lives together. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered unexpectedly. The wind picked up, bending the tall grass and rattling the windows of the farmhouse. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest as the first drops of rain began to fall. Luke moved quickly to secure the animals in the barn, while Sarah gathered supplies inside the house. Emma clung to her father's hand, eyes wide as the storm approached. The rain came down hard, thunder rolling over the hills and lightning splitting the sky. For a moment, the power flickered and went out, leaving the family in the flickering light of candles. Sarah held Emma close, her heart pounding. Luke stayed calm, lighting a fire in the hearth and reassuring them both as the storm raged outside. The small family huddled together, sharing stories to keep fear at bay. Sarah realized that despite the turmoil in the weather, she felt safe, for the first time in a long while. When the storm passed, the dawn brought a fresh, washed, clean world. The ranch had taken a beating, but nothing was broken beyond repair. Luke and Sarah worked side by side to assess the damage. Fences had fallen, trees uprooted, but the spirit of the land was strong, just like theirs. Emma helped by carrying small tools, her laughter ringing out as they repaired the battered fences. That evening, tired but content, Sarah looked around the kitchen at the people who had become her new family. "Thank you," she said softly to Luke. He smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "No need to thank me. We're in this together." The storm had tested them, but it also strengthened their bond. Sarah realized that with Luke and Emma by her side, she wasn't just surviving, she was truly living. Autumn's golden hues wrapped the ranch in a warm embrace as the days grew shorter and the air carried a crispness that hinted at the coming winter. The landscape shimmered with shades of amber and rust, a perfect reflection of the changes that had taken place in Sarah's life. The ranch was no longer a place weighed down by loneliness and hardship. It was alive with hope, laughter, and the quiet strength of a family forged through shared struggle and love. Sarah watched from the porch, as Emma chased after falling leaves, her small feet kicking up clouds of dust. Luke stood nearby, leaning against the fence with a gentle smile on his face, watching the girl with the tenderness of a father. Inside, the house was warm and filled with the comforting smells of freshly baked bread and brewed coffee. Sarah felt A deep sense of peace, knowing that this home was no longer just hers, it belonged to all three of them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Luke and Sarah sat side by side on the porch swing. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and a soft breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. "I'm glad you knocked on that door," Sarah said quietly, resting her head on Luke's shoulder. He smiled and took her hand. "Me too. I think we all found what we were looking for." Emma came running up to them, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the field. She handed them to Sarah with a shy smile. Sarah accepted them gratefully, her heart full. Life on the ranch was far from perfect, but it was theirs. Together, they would face whatever came next, weather the storms, celebrate the sunshine, and build a future rooted in love and resilience. For Sarah, Luke and Emma, the ranch was no longer just a place to live. It was home.